I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the Dell Inspiron 14 Plus. Let's get into the review. So it's been a couple of months now since Microsoft launched its Copilot Plus PCs. These are AI PCs running on ARM hardware, best exemplified by things like the Surface Laptop 7 that I've previously reviewed. And the Inspiron 14 Plus is Dell's take on this concept. So it's running a Snapdragon X Elite or Snapdragon X Plus processor. It's running on ARM. It has Copilot Plus features. And while there are some things to like about this particular laptop, they're not really in that AI space in my estimation. Let's get into why that is by first of all talking about the design. And look, from the outside, as I've got it here, you really wouldn't necessarily pick that this was a Copilot Plus laptop. It just kind of looks like very much any other Inspiron you've probably seen for the past few years. Dell has very much stuck to this design, and that has its pluses and its minuses. So, for example, I very much like the fact, and it's a small thing, but it is a thing, that when you tilt the display back, it tilts the keyboard up as the hinge moves. It's a nice little touch, and there are other nice little touches to this design. I like the privacy shutter on the webcam, for example. That's all good, and it's all familiar as well. If you're used to Inspirons, as I said, you'll be used to this. However, Copilot Plus PCs right at the moment are still relatively premium priced devices. So the model that I'm holding right now will run you $2,398, and that's not nothing. But this feels like it's a less expensive PC. It just doesn't look or feel particularly premium to me. There's a mix of plastic and metal in the construction. It doesn't quite have the sleek lines of some of its competitors. And whilst it's not the most expensive Copilot Plus PC out there, and maybe that's a factor for you, I would have liked maybe for it to feel a little bit more special in that regard. In terms of ports, the Dell Inspiron 14 Plus features two USB-C DisplayPort power delivery capable ports on the left side, near a microSD card reader, and then a single USB-A and combo microphone headphone jack on the right. All well, all good, all works just fine. There's no custom charging port on this laptop, which means no custom charger, but it does mean you'll have to use one of those USB-C ports for charging when the time comes. Dell sells the Inspiron 14 Plus with a couple of choices of display. The model loaned to me for the purpose of review featured a 14-inch 1610 QHD Plus IPS LCD touchscreen. Now, personally, touchscreens in Windows have never sat particularly well with me, but maybe they do with you. It is worth noting that the Inspiron 14 Plus does not have a full 360-degree hinge. It only leans back. It doesn't flip over, forming itself into a tablet, if that's important to you. Biometrics are handled via its 1080p webcam. And as I said before, I do like the privacy shutter. The only biometric problem I've had with this is it not recognizing me because I closed the privacy shutter. That's very much on me, not on it. In performance terms, when you're talking Copilot Plus, you're only talking two different processors, either the Snapdragon X Plus or the X Elite. And Dell sells varying configurations of the Inspiron 14 Plus with either the Plus or Elite processors. The model that they loaned me was the Snapdragon X Elite model, so the upper tier, with 1 terabyte of storage, also upper tier. There is a 512 gig variant, but with only 16 gig of RAM. You can also get it with 32 gig. So as supplied to me, that would run $2,398. There is a just sub $2,000 model that has just the Snapdragon X Plus with it, 16 gig of RAM and 512 gig of storage. And Dell has a variety of other Snapdragon X Elite models in its Latitude range, for example, where the price can creep up quite a bit more if you prefer that style. The whole point of difference with using a Snapdragon processor rather than something from, say, Intel or AMD is that you're skipping from x86 architecture over to ARM. And this brings with it some challenges, because not everything on Windows, even though Microsoft has been pushing ARM on Windows for quite some time now, is natively ARM compatible. Microsoft's claim when they launched Copilot Plus PCs was that up to 90% of the apps that people use will either be ARM compatible, there will be ARM compatible versions, or that Microsoft's Prism emulation layer will be able to handle running them. And that's maybe true and maybe not, and it very much depends on the apps that you want to run. There are a range of native ARM apps out there for sure. I mean, basic Microsoft Office, for example, has had ARM for a very long time now. And if you can run ARM apps, run them, because that way you'll dodge the performance hit you're going to get from Prism emulation. But it does make these laptops rather hard to compare like for like, because, for example, one of the standard benchmarks that I would use to compare like for like, PC Mark 10, does not have an ARM version at all. Now, 3D Mark will run, but it varies as to which of its tests have ARM versions or which are just using a Prism emulation layer. So, for example, 3D Mark Time Spy does not, so my test results with that are purely through Prism, and they've taken a performance hit as a result. Now, this is not a GPU-intensive laptop. This is not your video rendering machine of your dreams, or for that matter, your gaming machine of your dreams, and that very much shows in its GPU results. Here, I'll compare them just with ARM machines, so I'm not comparing outside of the ARM world. And the Dell Inspiron does okay, I suppose, but it's not a powerhouse in this way. And even if we removed the Prism emulation layer there, I don't think you're going to find that this is a particularly highly GPU performant machine. Then again, the point of Copilot Plus PCs is meant to be that they're all about the AI. They're all about the NPU built in, doing things that you can't otherwise do or making you more creative or productive as a result. But does that really happen? Well, I'm not so sure that it does, and a lot of that has to do with the limited number of Copilot Plus specific features that you're getting here. So, for example, you can get live captions, and this is on-device machine translation from one language to another. And this can work, but not terribly well. So in my own tests, for example, just using my own voice, just using the microphone to translate from variously Japanese and French into US English. It's US English only at the moment, by the way. So if you, for example, speak British English, or as I do, Australian English, yeah, you've got to put up with American spellings. Kind of annoying. But I digress. Using my own voice and with some simple language translation tasks, it does okay. It would probably get you out of a pinch, but honestly, it doesn't feel like you need this, because you can do this with off-device translation. Now, obviously, there are circumstances where you might not want that for business privacy reasons, for example. I can respect that. That bit will work, although if you push it harder with something faster, it often falls over. And for example, I pitted it using YouTube video in Japanese and French against just Google's own instant caption translation. Now, here, the live captions just absolutely fell over. They'd maybe get a word or two and then just go, nah, I can't keep up. I don't know what's going on. I'm not going to keep on translating. And that might not be a straight like-for-like test. It's a little difficult to tell whether Google is actually doing a bunch of these translations when a video is uploaded or live in the moment. But honestly, what you want out of that kind of thing is to be able to show someone a video and say, look, you might not speak the language that they're speaking, but you can understand it because of the captions, and that's just not going to work for you. That, at the moment, fundamentally is broken. Then there's Co-Creator, the ability to create AI images out of descriptions and your own mad little scribbles. And look, I'm not an artist, so in theory, Co-Creator should be great for my creativity, because I can sketch something simple out as I'm doing here and have Co-Creator create it for me. I have two problems with this. One, the results really just aren't that inspiring, and maybe that's my lack of artistic talent, but I'm not seeing anything here that doesn't scream, hi, I'm AI generated and kind of poor at it. And then, of course, as someone who works as a creator, predominantly in my career I've worked as a writer, and I don't like AI writing. And yes, total self-interest and bias here to an extent, but also an awful lot of AI writing is really bad. It's bad, bland stuff. And the same is true of AI art, and it would feel hypocritical of me to say, oh, don't like AI writing, but I'm bad at art, therefore AI art's great. No, I'm not going to go down that path. I'm not enthused by Co-Creator, but even if you are, it doesn't feel like it's any faster or any better than the already available online tools if you want to pursue those kind of creative opportunities. On the battery front, the one area where ARM has long held supremacy over x86 is in battery life for laptops. ARM's just more power efficient that way, so even if you've got the same size battery, you can often see significant battery life improvements. But here again, ARM giveth and ARM taketh away, because I typically run 2 separate battery tests to give a best and worst case scenario. So the best case scenario is just a local video playback test. That's kind of soft, but it gives you a nice, right, if I'm only using it lightly, it can last this long kind of figure. And then I tend to use PCMark's gaming battery benchmark to give a much more brutal figure of, right, if you hammer it, how long is it going to last? And the problem here is that PCMark 10's gaming battery benchmark just crashed every time I ran it. It's not ARM compatible. So all I could do was my local video test. And here, again, the Dell did okay, not best in class, not worst in class. I mean, that's still 20 plus hours of video playback, which should be enough for just about anyone. I mean, you'd have to have a fairly demanding boss to want you to work that long in a continuous manner. Obviously, that's a soft test, but still, all-day working battery life, very easy for this laptop. And observationally, that's true too. Observationally speaking as well, I have run specifically games along it because that's a nice harder test of the games that will run. Again, not everything will, and this isn't a gaming laptop. But I have run games at it to see what kind of battery life figures I can get, and you may be talking 1 to 2 hours on a really heavy sustained load, which is kind of what I would expect, but that's not a concrete and comparable figure because it's all a bit ad hoc and stopwatch tested, to be honest with you. So should you buy the Dell Inspiron 14 Plus? Well, look, as a laptop by itself, its best selling point is either going to be familiarity, it's that familiar Inspiron design, or battery life, because battery life generally is very, very good. However, you do have to weight that against the ARM nature of this laptop. Not everything will run, a decent quantity of things will run, and then there's the Copilot Plus features, and if it wasn't already obvious, I'm not enthused by them. They're not grabbing me. There's no killer app here. There's nothing that says to me, oh, you've got to get this laptop because it's got this feature which will change your world. I just don't think it will yet. And that's not Dell's fault. That's to do with what Copilot Plus can do. I should, I suppose, point out that at the time of recording, for example, Microsoft's recall feature, which screenshots your display on an ongoing basis to make it self-searchable, is not available. I've not tested with that. I will also be honest and upfront and say, I don't really want to test with that. And I don't really want to test with that because it feels like it's a massive privacy violation and a security nightmare in the offing. Microsoft, of course, hasn't released it for those precise reasons, because of the kickback there. But still, it leaves Copilot PCs with no real killer app, and that does make this a harder laptop to recommend. Anyway, that's my take on the Dell Inspiron 14 Plus. What do you think? Got any questions? Hit me up in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.